Hey everybody, welcome back. So in this video, we are going to talk about the flaps on model airplanes, okay? Got a cool email and young man said, can I do a video about flaps? Because he just got an RF Warbird and he said the flaps really do some interesting things to my plane. And what he described to me is exactly what it does. So after sharing a few emails with him, we decided I will do a video. If you're new to my channel, I am obsessed with giant scale airplanes, and I've been flying model aircraft since the very late 70s, which does make me an old timer, but not an old fart. Old farts are destroying our hobby. I love to embrace technology. I love drones, quads, I love anything that flies. But my passion is giant scale airplanes. And they've got to be at least 150 inches or bigger if I'm going to design and build my own. I do have some ARPs. I've got a Cessna 170 by Flex Innovations, to me the greatest flying airplane ever, and I have an Avante EDF, and I absolutely love it. So I do like smaller airplanes. Everything's just not big, okay? Real quick shout out to one of my sponsors, RTL Fasteners. Go to their website, spend more than $50, and use code DA30, and you get 30% off. And what do you get 30% off of? The coolest bolts, nuts, blind nuts, servo screws, any type of bolt nut or washer or blind nut you need for model aviation or the hobby, they're going to have. Okay, fantastic people, metric, standard, you name it, they've got it. So use code DA30, spend more than $50, and you'll get 30% off. So before I get into this little diagram, I want to talk about model aircraft and flaps. I have said many times in videos, you don't need them. And you don't. You really don't. Now, do they make some planes fly better? Yes, they do. Does it look cool and very scale when you're coming in for a landing? Yes, it does. But you really need them. Most of the time, not. Now, your mileage will vary depending on the airframe. My Avante loves to have like 15 degrees of flaps at takeoff and about 40 degrees of flaps on landing because it likes the drag. And I'm going to talk about the differences in the takeoff configuration and the landing configuration. But let's just say this A-10 is your model airplane that you're going to be flying, okay? Anytime you change the condition of the airplane, and I've talked about this before in videos, when you lower the gear has a lot of drag. When you lower your flaps, it is going to change the relative angle of attack of the way the wing is seeing the air it's moving through. It changes two things. It kind of changes the camber, or the relative camber, and then it changes the chord of the wing, which basically is changing your angle of attack. Most airplanes with a clean configuration with a semi-symmetrical wing will stall between 14 and 15 degrees of angle of attack against the relative wind it's traveling through. Without flaps, I'm talking about clean. So the thing is on full-scale airplanes, if you were coming in to land and you had 14 degrees of angle of attack, you might not see over the nose of your airplane. So when you lower the flaps and it changes the chord, and I'll show you in some diagrams what I'm talking about, it brings the nose down. So on full-scale aircraft, when you're landing, the flaps help create drag, lift, but they also help keep the nose of the airplane down so you can see over the nose to land, okay? A model aircraft, do we want the drag? Yes, if it's a really slippery airplane that's going to go real fast, we love the drag. Do we really need the lift? Probably not, okay? And look, your mileage could vary. I could be talking to somebody that's got a really complex, really heavy airplane, and you're like, absolutely, flaps make my plane fly better. And if it does, rock on. But I'm talking generally speaking from my own experiences here, okay? I'm talking about all the different airframes I've flown that's had flaps. The flaps, except on my Avante, you really don't, it doesn't make the plane fly better. If anything, it creates another complication in your sequence of landing, okay? So let's pop back to this. So, and this is just an airfoil that I made up in my Fusion 360, and it's a crappy airfoil, but I want you to realize that this airfoil right now, if it was flying through the air, has a certain angle of attack to support a certain amount of weight in flight. Heavier the plane, faster the airplane's got to go to produce lift. You do need some angle of attack relative angle of attack on the wing to produce some type of lift. Okay, when you go to lower the flaps, and I call this takeoff configuration, you're actually creating more lift because you've changed the camber and the chord of the wing. So the lift will outweigh the drag. When you are in a landing configuration, now your drag will outweigh will be more equal. The lift won't outweigh the drag on most wings that I've flown. Okay, so if we think about your camber, and this is a really bad diagram, but I just drew it, and then you think about your chord, notice that the relative chord angle of attack now is about 13, 14 degrees there. So now the plane perceives it's got a high angle of attack, but it's only on the wing with the flaps down, so your fuselage is going to be more level. If you fly planes with flaps much at all, when you're coming into land and you're going fast, you're pushing the nose down. If you come in with no flaps, you'll see your nose is high to slow down. So all I'm saying is that if you're going to fly flaps on an RC airplane, understand what it's doing to the wing, or to the way the aircraft's flying through the air. It's increasing some drag, it's increasing some lift, but if you don't use the trim on the elevator, you're going to be holding your stick probably down because the plane's trying to climb. That angle of attack of the wing has gone up, so the plane's going to try to balloon or climb. A lot of times you will mix that into your flap settings. So when you click the switch to bring your flaps down, you have a little bit of down elevator dialed in, just a little bit. And you can tweak and play with it so that just by flipping the flaps, you don't notice a pitch change in the airplane. But keep in mind, airspeed changes pitch too. And in model aircraft, we don't have airspeed indicators unless you got telemetry in your ear. And those aren't anything that you're going to really be able to use because it's going to be talking to your ear every second if you have it set like that, and it becomes annoying. So let's talk about, just real briefly, here's a P-40 in a clean configuration holding altitude at a certain cruise speed. As you slow the plane down to land it, if you don't use flaps, you can get as high as about 14 degrees angle of attack. If you look it up on Google, they say 15 to 16 degrees. Actually, I've played around a little bit with some nerd stuff a long time ago, and I believe most of the wings that we were flying were stalling at 13 or 14 degrees because we actually put an angle of attack indicator on a model airplane excuse me, that had a semi-symmetrical wing, and we were getting about 12 to 13 degrees before the plane started to stall. Look it up on Google. They're like saying 15 or 16 degrees, but you should understand what I'm trying to say. Landing like this would be really hard because your tail wheel might touch first. You can't see over the nose of the airplane if it was full scale. As a model, that's going to look scary when you're landing it. You drop the flaps, and now you have this kind of a lot of lift. You got drag. Your airplane's going to come in and land. I left the landing gears up on this illustration so you can see the flaps a little bit better. So basically, well, and hang on a minute. And then basically, you then have this airplane, which is my MSL2. It doesn't have flaps. It doesn't need them because it's only got a 4.5 cube wing loading. This plane is in between a glider and a sport flyer. Excuse me. So some airplanes don't need flaps. Okay, even when I land this airplane and I'm touching down, I'm only about probably 5 or 6 degrees nose up. There are planes like the Pitt Special. There's all kinds of planes out there that don't have flaps. Okay, so adding flaps to your airplane may or may not be a great idea. If it's a scale plane, you want it so the plane looks scale. If it's a P-40 or P-47, they all had flaps. But all I'm saying is that you might take off with one notch of flaps, and you might land with one notch of flaps. Okay, so all of the warbirds that I used to fly, I never landed any of them at full flaps unless I was trying to get one of those Kodak moments where my Corsair was turning base to final, and those 6 segments of flaps are dumped down in the air, gears are down, it looks like a carrier approach. But I didn't like flying like that because the drag was so high that if I wasn't really careful, that plane could slow down and I could stall it. I like to actually take off with 1 notch of flaps on my warbirds that I used to have. I still got 1 of flaps. When it comes to landing, I land with 1 notch because I like the little bit extra lift. I like to keep my nose down. It just feels more comfortable. Now, like I said on my Vonne EDF, that flap produces a lot of drag when it's at 40 degrees, and that helps me slow that plane down. Okay. Now, I intentionally didn't talk about all the different type of flaps out there, Fowler flaps, split flaps, all of that, because that's irrelevant in the way that I want to discuss how your plane behaves in the air with flaps. Okay. But to make a long story short here, if you're going to fly flaps on a model airplane, get up high, dump 1 notch of flaps, and trim your plane. Make sure you stay on the trim, because I'm always trimming my model airplanes when I'm flying them, so I don't have to have, I want my sticks pretty much neutral when I fly. But then when I go to full flaps, and do this high, put the nose down, pull the engine to idle, and see how much down your nose is to create a glide with those full flaps. And I actually practice doing dead stick landings at full flaps on some of my airplanes because you are really coming downhill. And then when you're starting to round it out at like 3 or 4 feet off the ground and leveling out, it's amazing how fast the airspeed bleeds off and your plane can actually quit flying if you're not careful. Okay, so if you want to fly flaps, awesome. They do look sexy as hell in the air when you're turning base to final, and I understand everybody wanting to use them. But make sure that you are dialing your plane in so that you don't get into that, what I call that dark corner or that closet when you're flying. Because if you get low and slow, especially turning base to final, if you've watched my video about landing, when you're turning base to final and you're yanking back on that stick to hold the turn and you're not adding power, you are slowing down. I guarantee you're losing airspeed. When you got flaps dumped at 40 degrees and you're doing that, you are slowing down almost like you got a drag chute out the back of the airplane. You've heard me say before, when you're holding your radio in your hand, you want that teeter-totter effect. If you're pulling back on your stick, you need to be pushing forward on the throttle. If you're pulling back on the elevator, pushing forward on the throttle when you're in that landing sequence. Because I've seen so many people crash on base to final, and they just look around like, what happened? And they got slow. And when you got flaps out there, it can exponentially happen faster than you've ever seen. Okay? Keep in mind, anytime you pull back on the stick, you're increasing the angle of attack of the airplane. If you're in a turn, and you're pulling up on that nose, the angle of attack is rising. You get above relative 14 degrees of angle of attack, and that could be the chord with the flaps down. That wing's going to quit flying. Okay? So that's it, everybody. I hope that you find this beneficial. All I'm trying to do is share my experiences here, okay? And I've gotten a couple of people that say I'm kind of sheepish when I do my videos. I don't want to be that know-it-all, that person who knows everything. I don't want to be that expert without any real practical experience. I'm only sharing my success with you so that I can help make other people successful. That's the whole intent of my YouTube channel, is to make sure people have success in model aviation and they have fun and they do really cool things with it. And if you want flaps, rock on, but learn how much the condition of your plane is changing. Okay? And I've talked about this so much. Just raising your nose, you're changing the condition of the airplane. Dropping the gear, you're changing the condition of the airplane. Dropping flaps, changing the condition of the airplane. If you're in a steep turn and you're not adding power to keep that airspeed up and it's burning off because your flaps are down, you're putting yourself into a condition of losing control of your airplane. Okay? So I will see you next time, everybody. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to build my YouTube channel. If you've watched it this long, you must be interested, so please share it. I'm trying to get this out to more and more people. And you have an awesome evening, and take care, rock on. And I always end my videos with saying, get a kid flying. They're 6 years old and above, embrace them. If they like FPV, embrace it. If they fly quads, embrace it. If they fly helicopters, embrace it. If they decide they want to fly a dirigible or a Hindenburg, freaking embrace it. Some of you old farts that are running off the youth, you are tarnishing and you're becoming toxic in the model aviation community. We need everybody, all hands on deck, and have fun, people. Okay, no drama at the airfield. See you next time. Rock on. Take care. Bye.